Are we ready now?
Cut.
Hey, welcome back from the commercial break. By the way, this segment is brought to you by
The Ozarka.
Water. Pure water. Run through a crappy filter and put on a hot truck in a plastic bottle. Guaranteed to give you some sort of carcinogen, or you're a biology major. What would that give you when you put water in
I'm not a chemist.
They're not sponsored.
What's the difference of a... Well, I can't say that? No. Okay. Guys, this is not brought to you by Ozarka. Ozarka did nothing to do with Propelio.
But we're bringing it to you today to try.
Oh, Trey is gonna love.
It's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
a lot of work.
Yeah, and you know what?
Get your scissors out.
And here's a secret.
Big scissors.
Here's a secret to making his life hell: is we don't take any delay, any gap in audio.
Right.
So that he's got to go into like a millisecond and try to splice this son of a bitch.
Right.
You know. Bam! Let's get going, guys. Let's talk about lease options. On this segment, we're going to talk about the 3 types of lease options. All right, Max, how many types of lease options are there?
3.
All right. By the way, guys, Max is still here. He won't go away. I think he's homeless. So let's talk about the 3 types of lease options. And why is it so important? Why is it so important to know the 3 types of lease options? Because so many times I've heard people coming to us, maybe they post on a Facebook group or a web forum, and they reach out to me. Maybe they're like just about to be a student. They go, oh my gosh, they're so excited. I got a seller I'm talking to about a lease option. What contracts do I use? Well, that's probably pretty dang important to know which contracts you use, because the contracts that you use depend on which type of lease option you're going to be doing, all right? And so we're going to talk about the 3 different types right now. So let's get started with the 3 types of the lease options. There is a straight lease option. There's a sandwich lease option, sometimes called an SLO, or a lease option assignment. Sometimes called a wholesale lease option. A lease option assignment is exactly what we teach and what we specialize in. So those are 3 types. And I'll talk about each one and when you would use each one. So the most simple type of lease option is the straight lease option. So what is a straight lease option? Well, let's assume our audience, Max, has a house, and maybe he was going to rent it out. Maybe he has rented it out, but now the market's gone up. He'd like to capture that appreciation. He wants this to sell that house, but he'd also like some cash flow. He wants to squeeze as much as he can out of it. So rather than rent it out, he offers it as a lease option. Okay, so Max, as the seller, he's going to offer this house as a lease option rather than rent it out. So there's advantages to him doing that. So let's compare, first of all, renting with a lease option. So with a rent, Max, our seller, is going to get normally the average market rent, whatever the market rent is for that area. The deposit is going to be equal to about the first month's payment. Most of the damages, repairs, anything is going to exceed the deposit, by the way. So if your deposit's like $1,500, it doesn't take that long to go through, for a landlord to go through $1,500. Right. And even if there is no damage, he still has to return that deposit within 30 days after that lease ends. If there's any repairs, the tenant's going to call the seller, okay? The result is the house gets more and more beat up as you continue to rent it out, and it can oftentimes become a thorn in your side if this is just not something that you're passionate about. So let's look at doing a straight lease option versus a rental. So with a straight lease option, the lease payment that the owner is getting is usually a little bit higher than market rent. There's no deposit. This is important, guys. There's no deposit. However, there's an option fee. That's where the buyer is coming along and putting an option fee down instead of a deposit. So the owner's going to get about 4 to 5% of the value of the house. Is going to get that down, non-refundable. What does that mean? It means that if the buyer backs out or doesn't buy the house in a year, there's nothing to return. There's no deposit to return.
And that's huge. There's never a deposit with a lease purchase, okay? Never. Don't ever say deposit or anything, because that, you assume, can be refundable.
Right, and it muddies the water.
Right.
So never take a deposit with a lease option. It's always a non-refundable option consideration or an option fee. Let's talk about the repairs on a lease option. Again, we're still talking about the straight lease option, but the repairs are about the same. The tenant optionee which is the buyer, the person buying the property on a lease option, is usually responsible for most of the repairs on the property. Our tenant buyers get a home warranty. Costs them now $600, and it covers everything. So the seller is very hands-off for the seller. But nevertheless, sticking to the straight lease option, the tenant option only takes care of the repairs. Ideally, we've got a home warranty. Everything's really taken care of. And the price, the seller's getting full market price. There's no haggling, no negotiating, and no commission. So with a straight lease option, if you own a house and you have rented it out, or you've considered renting it out, and you want to sell on a lease option, again, your advantages are non-refundable option fee, usually 4% or so of the price, versus getting a deposit. You're typically going to get higher than market rent. The buyer usually takes much, much better care of the property because they're in the process of buying it. They're not just borrowing it. They're actually in the process of buying it.
And if I could touch on that, because that's one of the sellers we work with. That's one of their biggest fears is what if the buyer they still think of it as a rental property? What if they tear the house up and leave? Mm-hmm. How do you answer that?
Yeah, with our buyers, this is not Animal House where it's a frat house and they come moving in, putting down 1 month's deposit with the intent of tearing up a house. They're in the process of buying a house, and we work with houses that are in nice price ranges. They're putting down typically $10, $12, $14, $15, $16,000 non-refundable, and we're working with them to get them financed within 10 to 12 months. They're in a fast track to get financed. This is not where anybody can just get into our program as a buyer. And so they take very, very good care of the property. So again, on the straight lease option, it's just where there's no third party. It's just, if Joe's the seller and I'm the buyer, it's just him and I, okay? There's no third party taking care of the contracts or anything. So as an example, with a straight lease option, if Joe's the seller, he may get, say, $10,000 down, or the option fee, $10,000, monthly cash flow, higher than normal monthly rent, and then he's going to get this equity upon the cash out. So when I go to get financed, he's going to get cashed out and get that equity as well. So when to use a straight lease option? When you're willing to part with the property. This is very important. If you have a property you're looking to do a lease option on, please be willing to part with that property. Don't look at it at a lease. Don't offer it as a lease option with the whole intent of just holding on to this thing for a long time and hoping that people don't buy. You don't want to take advantage of people. You want to structure this properly, and you want to be willing to when the buyer when the buyer goes to buy, that you sell the property. When not to use a straight lease option. If you have a property and really you enjoy having the property for whatever purposes, the cash flow or whatever, and you really don't want to sell it in the long term, don't do a lease option. Just rent it out. If you're not comfortable selling that property, don't do a straight lease. Don't do a lease option. Okay. So now let's talk about the second type of lease option, which is a sandwich lease option. Now this is going to get a little more involved here, but stick with me. I'm going to go slow because Max is taking notes. So a sandwich lease option is what you'll use if the owner has some decent equity, has fairly low payments, is more desperate than just wanting to rent it out, and wants to stop the bleeding. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to demonstrate what a sandwich lease option is. This is where you control a property that you stay in the middle of. Okay? You don't own the property, but you control it. And I'm going to show you how to get paid 3 times. And I'm going to use Max. He's going to come on camera here, and he's going to be one of the parties here. Okay, Max, come on up here. All right, so I got Max up here now. He's going to be our prop. There's 3 profit centers, first of all, in a sandwich lease option. Let me show you the 3 profit centers, then I'm going to use you as our prop, okay? Let me ask you, are you nervous?
A little bit.
A little bit nervous? Have you ever done any education for lease options?
Have you ever sold a house before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Never sold a house?
Never.
Okay.
Huh. Have you ever done something you were embarrassed of?
A couple times.
All right. Well, there's the camera. It's your time to confess.
I'm here.
What does that mean? I'm here. Anyway. 3 profit centers in a sandwich lease option. Non-refundable option fee, cash flow monthly, and you're going to get equity upon cash out. You got me nervous, Max. So as an investor, a sandwich lease option allows you to make 3 profit centers on a lease option on a property that you do not own, all right? So let's break this down because you're sandwiched between the seller and the buyer.
Is that why it's called a sandwich lease
That
option?
is why it's called a sandwich lease. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
A sandwich lease option. So here's what I'm gonna do. So I'll tell you what, you stand here, Max. I'm gonna stand next to Joe. And I wanna make sure is he on camera, Trey?
Yep.
All right, come on over here a little bit. Okay, so here's the sandwich lease option. Let's assume I am you. I am the investor, okay? Joe will be, let's say you're the seller. I like the seller on the left, okay? You're the seller. You've got a house. Joe's going to be the buyer or the end buyer. I'm leasing to buy. I'm John Jackson. So here's a sandwich lease option. This is where you own a house and you're, and we'll talk about the levels of desperation on another segment, but you own a house that you'd like to sell. You're a little bit desperate, but you can't really wholesale it. Okay, you're not desperate enough to just give it away for 50 cents on the dollar, okay? Possibly. So I come in, and I know this house is worth about $200,000, as these numbers show. But on a sandwich lease option, though, I'm going to negotiate with you, okay? And we set up a contract. I get you down to $170,000. I say, Max, I like this house. I'll tell you what. How about this? How about we do a 5-year lease option, $170,000. I'll pay you $170,000 for this house, okay? I'll pay you $1,200 a month, okay? And all the repairs, unless the roof blows off or something, it's taken care of. Does that sound good? Mm-hmm. So now he's going to stop the bleeding or make cash flow each month on this house. We've got the price set at $170,000, okay? Now I'm not going to give Max any money as an option fee except $10. Or if I am, it's going to be as little as possible. In other words, I'm going to have as little money invested in this property and this transaction as possible. So $170,000 is my contract, $1,200 a month. Now what do? I've got this under contract with a lease option between Max and myself. Now I'm going to put a sign in the yard that says, whatever, no bank qualifying, lease option.
Which is great for me because my credit is in the gutter and I can't qualify for a home.
Right, so Joe comes along, sees my sign or sees my ad online, says, hey, I saw that house on Main Street, whatever. It looks like it was a rent to own. I go, yes, it sure is. And he starts asking me about the house. I said, well, Joe, man, I'm so glad you called. Man, this house, we've been getting a lot of calls on this house lately. This house it's $200,000.
All right.
And $1,600 a month. And then I shut up. And his next question is going to be, well, how much is it down? What's that? How much do I have to come up with down? And with a sandwich lease option, I want to get as much money as I can out of him. So I will probably say, well, how much do you have?
Well, I guess, next month I could probably scratch, work's been slow lately. How much did you want again? 10,000?
Yeah, we're looking at least 10,000 down.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I could probably get some help from my relatives, my family, and I could do that.
So now Joe is going to pay me 10,000 down. That's mine to keep. It's not refundable. He's then going to pay me $1,600 a month. So Joe pays me $1,600 a month. So keep in mind, I kept the 10,000. You with me, Max? That's Profit Center 1. Mm-hmm. He pays me $1,600 a month. I pay you $1,200. He pays me $1,600. I pay you $1,200. So I'm making $400 a month. That's cash flow. That's cash flow, right? Mm-hmm. That's Profit Center number 2. All right. Then the third one is Joe, after say 10 months, a year, whatever the case may be, goes and he gets financing for this house. Well, I still have $20,000 of equity, right? Because he paid $10,000 down. So he cashes me out. I get my $20,000 remaining of equity, and I pay you off. I pay your $170,000 off, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I'm sandwiched between Joe, the buyer, and Max, the seller. So I'm sandwiched between that. So it's 3 profit centers in a sandwich lease option. Does that make sense, Max? Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, if that's the case, then why doesn't every investor do a sandwich lease option as opposed to a lease option assignment, which is what we do?
Yeah, so the next lease option I'm going to talk about is a lease option assignment. Now, with a sandwich lease option, there is some inherent risk in the sense of I signed a contract with you for $170,000 and $1,200 a month, right? Well, so now I've got to make payments to you each month, right? Well, what happens if 3 months later I haven't found Joe yet? I've just made 3 empty house payments.
Or if I stop making payments
Right.
to you.
Or if Joe stops making payments to me, I've got to start, I still have got to pay you. I've got an obligation there. And so there's an inherent risk there, especially if you're starting off and don't know how to set the numbers, how to screen for Joe, how to know what to look for.
Right.
And so we always recommend.
Because you're assuming I'm going to be able to qualify at the end of the lease period.
Right.
And you're not. You didn't tell me what I needed to do. You know.
Right. So I've got to do my due diligence and know how to do that. So what I tell people is before you do a sandwich lease option, I prefer that you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 lease option assignments with no risk under the belt. Because now you know the flow of things.
Right.
You know how to set the numbers. You know how to screen the buyer. You know?
And you'll definitely want a rainy day fund
Yes.
for the sandwich lease option in case things go south. You know, you need to have an exit or at least something to keep you afloat until, you know, something goes wrong.
Right. I recommend having at least 3 months of reserves. So in this case, you know, I'd want to have at least $3,600 in an account somewhere in case, you know, I've got to access those. So, but that's why we tell people to start off with lease option assignments. And a lot of times people will learn about lease options at a weekend seminar or something from somebody else and try to go do a sandwich lease option. Suddenly, you know, they're losing money because they didn't understand.
Right.
They weren't trained properly.
So the potential to profit more is there, but there's risk now.
Right.
Serious risk.
So in other words, on a sandwich lease option, I'm subletting the property to Joe, but it has an option to purchase on it. Okay. So again, in this example, he gave me $10,000 down. I'm making $400 a month cash flow and equity upon cash out. Now people say, I'll tell you what, you're the seller. Say, well, why would a seller do this, John?
Well, why would I do this, John?
Good question, Max. Max, scoot in here. You're off camera here, I think. Good question. Because why would a seller do a sandwich lease option? Because the seller wants to sell the house but can't accept 50 cents on the dollar. They can't do a wholesale deal. This gives the owner possible income each month. It stops the bleeding if the house is empty, right? Takes that thorn out of their side. And get this, Max, there is no transfer of title in a lease option. So in this case, you were the seller, I'm John, and he's going to be the buyer. You keep title. We don't go to a title company, you don't give me title or you don't give a warranty deed. You keep the title, okay? Until he gets, in this case, until he gets you financed, gets me financed out and we cash you out. Then he gets the title. So you retain control of the property as far as the title. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's less risk to the owner than you're subject to, okay?
And if I stop making my payments, you could evict me as opposed to
Yes.
A foreclosure,
Right.
where if you structured it as an owner finance, let's say,
Right.
you'd
I'd
have some
to
more
foreclose.
problems.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. So again, like I said, I don't recommend sandwich lease option until you've got about 6, maybe 10 assignments under the belt, because we talked about some of the inherent risks there.
Cool.
All right,
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, can you get out of here, Max? Oh my God.
You're famous.
Yeah, you got on a camcorder. Jeez, Max. All right, let's take a look at the lease option assignment, guys. Now, with the lease option assignment, there's only one profit center lease option assignment, but it's a very fast profit center, and there's essentially no risk involved and no money required. So lease option assignments are what Leasing to Buy specializes in, and it's what we have our students focus on first. So what is a lease option assignment? So our company signs a contract with the seller with all the terms, the price, and everything in that. Our assignment fee that we're going to be making, the monthly payment, all that's in that contract. Then we market that contract with online ads, signs in the yard, everything to the end buyer. Okay. Once we find the end buyer, then we assign the contract and we are out of the deal. So what happens is, if Max was here and he was my seller, we would sign the contract with him, full price, everything. We're not making any payments. We're just saying, here's what the terms are of the lease option. Then we've got our contract to go out and market. So now we market, sign the yard, online ads, etc. If Joe's the buyer, he comes along, he pays us our assignment fee for that contract. Okay, that's our fee. Once he pays us our assignment fee, we drop out of the deal, and now the deal's between him and the seller. So he's making the payments every month to the seller. We got our assignment fee, we're out of it.
And that's where I think you get the term wholesaling lease options comes into play,
Yeah.
because you kind of are wholesaling the contract But instead of to an investor or cash buyer, it's to a lease purchase buyer, so it's a little bit different.
Right, because you're assigning the contract to the end buyer that's going to be buying the house. So again, once you've assigned your contract, you're out of the deal. Now, what are the benefits to the seller? Because oftentimes people will say, well, they're like, well, John, why would a seller want to do this?
Right.
Well, why would a seller want to do this? Well, they get full price for the house. There's no negotiating going on. I'm setting the numbers so the owner's getting full price. I'm not negotiating with the seller. They get cash flow each month. Normally they're cash flowing definitely $300, maybe $400 a month. The house we're about to get in Arlington, I think he's going to be cash flowing a couple $1,000s a month because he's almost paid off his house.
Okay.
So it's going to be super sweet for him. The buyer takes very good care of the property because they're in the process of buying it. The seller doesn't pay commission. So on a $400,000 house, the seller's going to make a minimum of $24,000 more by using us as for lease option assignment. And of course, they get their equity upon cash out. So a lot of advantages there. And again, it's very hands-off for the seller. So why are lease option assignments so great for us or for you as the investor? Well, there's no money or investment required. There's no risk involved. You have nothing at risk. You're not making any payments. You're not on the hook for anything. There's no negotiating. And it's much, much easier to have the seller say yes than when you're lowballing them. It's so easy to get the seller to say yes. And you can do them from anywhere. And I put, this screen says even a bike. I was literally on my bike one time and talking to, closing a deal, riding my bike across roof snow, and closed a deal while riding a bike on my headset. And it's just that easy to explain to a seller, okay, let's go, let's do it. But what do you think about some of the benefits of the lease option assignment for the investor and for the students, people starting off with investing? We've talked about it a little bit, but these are just some of the advantages to the investor, people watching out there.
I think, with all the students and listening to their stories, the main benefit to you guys just starting out or the investor is no risk, right? So that's the biggest thing. You're not taking title, you're not making repairs, you don't need a contracting team. So that's big. No risk, no liability. And then no money involved, because a lot of students that I speak to, they're getting into wholesaling, they're getting into lease options because they don't necessarily have a large fund to invest, to purchase a property, to whatever. So those are the two main, I think, advantages or benefits to the investor is, okay, you got wholesaling, I could do that. Everybody and their brother's doing that, or I could do lease options, not have any competition or very little, and go that route. And I think that's what's attractive for a lot of investors deciding, what do I want to do? Or if you're an experienced investor, it's another tool in your toolbox.
Oh yeah,
right?
Definitely.
So that's pretty much it. I can't think of anything you haven't already mentioned.
So when do you use a lease option assignment? Lease option assignments are where you as the investor, you want to use a lease option assignment when you're dealing with nice houses, pretty houses that are move-in ready, no repairs needed, and the owner wants full price. So that's going to be, think about how many houses fit that criteria.
Well, every seller wants full price.
Right.
That's a given, know, and not all of them are desperate enough to sell for 50 cents on the dollar, like you said. And, you touched on, we're not assessing repairs. We're not determining value. We're not stepping into the P house. We're working with very nice homes, and there's no problems with them. And it's a win-win-win for everyone. Yeah. The seller's getting full market price. We're obviously getting paid, and the buyer's getting a house that they otherwise couldn't own.
Yeah. And we'll in one of the other segments, we'll pull up leasing to buy, and we'll show some houses that we have, and I can even show the one that we're about to get, I guess, possibly in Arlington. Well, I know we're getting it, but maybe I can show that on the screen there.
You and we closed on a house, a few weeks ago,
Yep.
Never saw it. Never
Yep.
talked.
Yep.
Never had to go there in person.
Nope.
You know?
Yeah, and that's the thing is you don't have to see the house. You know what a house looks like. Normally the pictures are online anyway.
Right.
You know, so you don't have to see the house or you don't have to meet the seller. So many times I know you've gotten this where you're talking to a seller, putting everything together, you get the numbers sent to them, and the contracts, and they go, okay, well, don't you need to come see the house?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not really.
Yeah.
I've seen it. It's
Right.
online.
Right.
I know what a bathroom looks like. I just got to market this sucker. You know, so. So again, lease option assignments are exactly what I teach our students to start with. So again, my company, Leasing to Buy, has really perfected the lease option assignment business over 16 years in business, as far as how to do the marketing, how to find the buyers, how to screen the buyers, and everything. And so we've really honed in on the lease option assignment, and really perfected the whole strategy and the whole process. So as a recap, there's three types of lease options. So again, to recap, there's a straight lease option where you own the property. When I say you own, you don't have to own it free and clear of a mortgage. It's just that you own a property that maybe you were going to rent out, and now you're going to do a straight lease option instead. There's a sandwich lease option where you stay in the middle. You're getting the 3 profit centers there. And there's the lease option assignment where you're assigning that contract and then you're out of the equation. You assign it to the end buyer. Now the end buyer makes the payments directly to the seller, and you're out of the deal. So those are 3 types of lease options. Now for our next section that we're about to cut into, we're going to go into lease option assignments in more detail even, and talk about again how those are structured and everything, and do that. So, all right, guys, I guess that's it for the 3 types, and we'll see you on the next segment on the lease option assignments.